Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined by the MHSAA Executive Director, Mark Ewell. How are you, Mark?
Hello, Casey. Good to be with you. Good
Uh,
afternoon or evening or morning, depending on when your viewers are watching this.
Absolutely. At time of recording, it is week 9 of the high school football season. I know there's been a lot going on, but we'll just start off with how have fall sports been going so far?
The fall's been very, very smooth. A big part of that is whenever you have great weather. And, as you and I are recording this here of week 9 of the regular season, the weather has been incredible this year. I mean, we're talking 70 degrees most of the week this week. Hopefully that hangs on. So, no, good weather, good crowds, good games, some different faces in some of the polls as we head into Selection Sunday this coming week. So no, the fall it's there have been zero conversations about pandemics or viruses, or it has really been back to basics, and I think that's been really great for our schools.
You mentioned Selection Sunday. We'll obviously talk about this. Why don't you? It's Selection Sunday, of course. Obviously, a big day. Kind of a new time because usually like 4:30 p.m. And now I can officially say FanDuel Sports Detroit that will be on there. So obviously new name, kind of obviously the same people and watched for decades. Just kind of talk about that situation because this whole when we get into the TV side of obviously they are the football and the basketball and stuff like that. What kind of has changed with all that? And obviously it's something that you're monitoring as well with the bankruptcy that Diamond Sports is currently going through right now.
So really good question. So obviously Diamond Sports, they were the company, and to go back, I think 3 steps, you had all of the Fox Sports regional networks, of which Detroit was one of those. So for those of us that have been paying attention for a while, it used to be Fox Sports Detroit.
Right.
Well, then there was actually a federal case of whether the empire of Fox Entertainment was a monopoly, not a monopoly, back and forth. And so essentially, they sold off the regional sports networks to Diamond Sports. Well, Diamond Sports went bankrupt, and it was during that process that Fox Sports Detroit became Bally's Sports Detroit. Obviously Bally's, whose primary business is in the casino business. Now they do have some other things in terms of, fitness centers and in those kinds of things. But we've been Bally's BSD for some time now, and if you've seen the media reports of late last week, there's now going to be another rebrand as Diamond kind of emerges from bankruptcy, and it's going to be FanDuel TV. Do I like the optics or the sound of FanDuel TV? No. Just with the whole fact of gambling. But then again, part of it is that's where we somewhat were with Bally's. FanDuel just happens to be a little bit more in your face. The good thing in working with the staff, and we'll be working with a lot of the same faces, even under the rebrand that we were with Bally's. So that's really, really good, is a lot of the folks that we're communicating with, and we have been assured that during our high school contest, the branding will be MHSAA, not FanDuel. So you would really need to look hard to see any of those references during our telecast. They understand the position that we're in. So we do still have years left on that contract. We're excited that our football and in both boys and girls basketball championships will remain on statewide TV. It'll be the same channels. There's still the main channel along with the plus channel if there is ever a Red Wings or a Pistons conflict. That's one of the reasons why our Selection Sunday show is earlier this year than what it's ever been in the afternoon, because there is a pro game that night on the main channel. So for us to have our selection show on the main channel, it's now a 4:30 start. What'll actually be coaches will love it because that'll give them about a 2.5 hour head start on their game preparation once, for week one, once the pairings are announced. So, part of me philosophically, Mark, FanDuel, did you look at some other options? Well, the reality is for us to stay on statewide broadcast television, there is not another option at the time. So, well, again, the all of the FanDuel and DraftKings and all of that noise that's out there, if we had our way, we would certainly steer clear of that. But like I said, with the rebrand after Fox Sports Detroit, it was Bally's, and now it's FanDuel, and unfortunately, that's just kind of the landscape right now that all of us live in.
Yep. Kind of explain Selection Sunday a little bit. What is, because it's a very busy day at the MHSAA office. So what is before it goes to before FanDuel announces what the matchups are and all that fun stuff, you guys obviously have to meet and draw the line. So kind of explain how that all works.
So we do an awful lot of legwork on Saturday, making sure that we have every score in. Not just the score of all of our Michigan schools, but all of their opponent scores, if there's some out-of-state schools. So the work that we do trying to run down any missing or unreported score is really really a big task. We'll come in Sunday morning. We'll get started by 8 a.m. There is a short window if schools believe that there's been an error with their own playoff points or playoff points of other schools. There's a short window where schools have to call us to bring the issue to our attention. And then once that window comes and goes, we have two teams here in the building. We'll have a team that will do divisions 1, 3, 5, and 7, the first draft of the pairing. So what each team has, and then the other team obviously is 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then we also split the 2 8-player divisions. So they're in 2 separate conference rooms, and we put the 32 dots on the map and we draw the circles. So of those, and it's all based on geography. It's not based on who's who or records or who play. It is strictly the 32 teams and of the 8 4-team districts and the 4 8-team regions. It's based strictly on the geography. After each of those teams meet separately, we then come together in a large conference room, and basically the 2 teams have to present to the entire group. So we'll have about a dozen staff that are involved in that. And what we then do is when each team kind of reports back, the entire group makes sure that, yep, the geography here makes sense. The circles make sense. It kind of aligns with what past practice has done. And then once all of those 10 maps get approved, we then have staff that types out the pairings based on those matchups. And then that information does get to our television partner, and then they go into production early that afternoon. And then by the time you see the show this year at 4:30 p.m., the tournament field is set and away we go. So it's a busy morning here. It's very collaborative, a lot of working together. If, there are, individuals on our staff that happen to live in a community or have ties to a certain program, they leave the room. So when I had kids that, my one son played football at DeWitt.
Yep.
Obviously I was not part of that division's initial draft. And then whenever DeWitt came up, I typically would get up and leave the room. And you then depend on the 11 others to make sure, when we approve the maps and put the pairings together. So we also, what's important to note is we do have, depending on the year, 1 or 2 outside representatives that sit in and watch from the Michigan High School Football Coaches Association. And the individuals that have served in that role, and again, they're able to give their input, but the biggest takeaway is they really see how the process works, and they're like, boy, the geography and the maps really drive the process. That it is not political. It is simply dots on the map, putting the groupings together. And so it's been good that we've gotten some of the leadership of the Football Coaches Association who have sat at the table with us to really affirm that the way this is done is really the best way possible.
Okay, so also I know the order changed for games last year. What's the order going to be like this year? And I know because obviously it's going to be kind of the return to normal schedule. Obviously last year, I know Michigan State hosted a game on the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. So that pushed everything back. But going in from that, I believe it's a return to normal schedule for this year.
Close. So we are back to Friday, Saturday.
Yep.
Our Friday schedule will still be the even number games with
Yeah.
one tweak. We're actually going to put at the end of each day are going to be our biggest division games. And part of that, what we learned last year is, typically in divisions 1 and 2, we have a lot of Metro Detroit teams who are in those games. Well, when you play those as the last game of the day, at least for travel time, at least for one of those teams. And heck, last year, our last game on Sunday happened to be Belleville and Southfield A&T. So you had two teams that, really pretty reasonable travel in terms of getting down. So we're scheduled on Friday, and we're starting this year as we did last year. Both days will start at 9:30 a.m., give us an extra half hour in the day. We'll start with Division 8. And then we're going to go to Division 4, and then Division 6, and then we'll finish up Friday with Division 2. And then Saturday will be the same thing. We'll start with Division 7, then Division 3, Division 5, and then we'll finish up the weekend with the Division 1 game on early Saturday evening.
All right. So, and of course, what is now known as FanDuel Sports Detroit will broadcast all those games. So,
what we're saying here internally, it's FDTV. So yes, we'll be on FDTV. And again, depending on, I think most of our games this year will be on the main channel, but of course, with the Wings and Pistons up and going, when there ever is a conflict, our game then is still broadcast live, but it moves to the Plus channel.
Plus channel or the app.
Or the app is always good as well.
Yeah, I'm talking to the people that have like YouTube TV or something like that, because I know that that channel has not been and it's not on there. So yeah, if you have the app, that's where you go. So I do, since we're on the topic of football, I know this was a topic of conversation the last few weeks. What went on at Seline. Can you just kind of explain that situation to people and because I know there was some news recently on that.
So I'll even back up a half step. So the MHSAA is a voluntary membership organization. So in other words, every summer, every high school that wishes to join the MHSAA, and by the way, we're a very cheap date. It costs nothing for schools to join our organization each year. So there's not membership dues, there's not a membership fee. So let's just stay where we're at right now. So East Lansing High School, every summer, they voluntarily agreeing to join the MHSAA for that school year. The way that it works is they, through their Board of Education, vote to adopt all the rules in the MHSAA handbook. And you see our unique logo. It's our 100th anniversary this year of the MHSAA, but every summer schools adopt the rules, the penalties, all of those rules they adopt as their own. So now when schools, and so now we'll move forward a half step. So now you get into the school year, and we are aware of violations in really one of two ways. The first is when a school realizes that they have committed an unintentional or inadvertent violation. Whenever that happens, by the way, the handbook says that schools then have to self-report the violation. We're a membership-run organization, and when that happens, schools, and this happens quite typically. So I want to say that in the fall, whether it be at the freshman level to the varsity level, it's been, I think, in 4 different fall sports, we've had 11 schools that have played an athlete who was ineligible. And the penalty could not be more clear that when an ineligible athlete participates, the penalty is forfeiture. That is the consistent penalty. It is applied across the board. It is applied consistently. And it is, I've only been here 21 years, and I can tell you that every single time an ineligible athlete has participated in a game, the penalty has been forfeiture 100% of the time in those 21 years. Now, there's also other occasions to where information will reach us that a violation has occurred. We'll then investigate, and then in some cases, if the school hasn't self-reported, we'll have a finding of fact. And if in fact, again, an ineligible athlete was used, then we move forward and we apply that penalty. So like I said, I believe it was 11 different times this fall, which is not atypical. You know, a lot of times it's a transfer kid that has moved in at the last minute, or it was a divorce situation that for whatever reason, all the facts weren't known, or all the facts weren't known at the time. That's just, that's a somewhat normal process that unfortunately we have to follow when those and think of it though, 11 times, we have 752 high schools in the membership. Our fall athletes are well over 100,000 kids. Our schools and our athletic administrators really do a great job in guaranteeing eligibility before they put kids on the field. And in those handful of occasions where that doesn't happen, unfortunately, the rule is clear and the penalty is even more clear.
Yeah. So just, and then really just kind of going, from that, just kind of, I know this topic was kind of talked about, like, I know they appealed the penalty, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of talk about how that process works.
So again, being an organization of member schools, we've got a very clearly defined due process procedure that typically a decision gets made at a staff level, and then there's kind of a hierarchy within our staff. And so if something is been handled by one of our assistant directors and the school doesn't like the result or kind of the ruling of that, well, then it moves next to the executive director. And then any decisions or rulings that I might make, then the next step in that appeal process is to our executive committee. Our executive committee is 5 members of our board of directors, made up of superintendents, principals, and athletic directors. And our executive committee meets once a month. And they typically review requests for waiver. A lot of times it's for transfer kids that a student is changed from this school to that school. By rule, they're ineligible. It doesn't fit one of the exceptions, but if there's a hardship or there are extenuating circumstances, then those kinds of requests go to our executive committee. But the key thing there, Casey, is those asks for waiver have to be in advance. You don't play that student until, and if you want to make an appeal to the executive committee, then if the executive committee grants eligibility after that point, that student can then play. You can't go to the executive committee after the fact. So, a lot of times what a school may do is they'll self-report a violation. They're going to invoke the penalty that's in the handbook and move forward. And then in some cases, even when there is a self-report, there is an ask for an appeal or reconsideration of the penalty, but that's a process, again, that's open to all of our schools. And there's a certain hierarchy in terms of how that works, where it goes from assistant director to executive director and then to the executive committee. It's quite straightforward.
So really outside of that, we'll obviously pivot and move on, because I know we got some fall sports coming up. Was our first round of tournaments going on. What this year, what have you kind of noticed? Because numbers have seemed to be going up, because at this time next year we're going to be welcoming in some new sports.
We are 2 new sports next year. So yeah, it's hard to believe that golf and tennis and UP cross country are already done. Those championships were completed last weekend, and just around the corner, we've got cross country, and we're now in regional week for boys soccer, which is a very exciting time of the year. And then volleyball and football will get started here soon. But yeah, a year from now, we'll also be sponsoring a tournament for girls field hockey. And then a year from this spring, so the spring of 2026, we'll be sponsoring our first tournament for boys volleyball. So certainly in kind of a growth mode in those 2 sports. So this is the last year that they're still competing with a state championship that's run by their coaches association. And so schools were a lot of communication between our staff and those 2 communities here in kind of this year of transition or build up is an MHSAA sport. So we're really looking forward to next school year where we'll have some more championships that'll be in the mix.
Absolutely. So kind of previewing I know we're still in fall mode, but obviously winter sports are going to be here right before, right as you know it. Is there going to be are there any changes coming, potential rule stuff? Because I know obviously, the big one last year was basketball and the one-on-one and the one-on-one stuff. I know obviously hockey a few years ago, went to seeding in the once we got to USA. Is there any big changes that people need to know about this year with any of
Well, I think that the biggest change is going to be in our basketball tournament. We're now at the district level. We're going to use MPR and seed every team. So if you're in a 7-team district, what we were using was MPR just to seed 1 and 2 and put them on opposite sides of the bracket. Starting this winter, we're going to use MPR to seed every team in the district. So if there is so let's say it's a 5-team district, on opening night, on Monday night, the number 4 seed by MPR is going to play the number 5 seed. And then the winner of that game will play number 1. And then the bottom half of the bracket on Wednesday would be 2 versus 3. So hockey has been doing that, actually, seeding their entire bracket based on MPR. And that's actually the same thing that was done this fall for boys soccer. And we'll do the same thing for girls soccer. So no, nothing in terms of actual big playing rule changes. But folks will just know that district bracket, we're now going to seed it 1 through 6 or 1 through 7, right on through, which both our soccer and basketball communities really wanted.
And then the any changes, I know I'll ask you this again, but any changes coming up in the spring, or are we still or could we still see some? I know we haven't had I think you've had the committee meeting yet, have you?
So yeah, everything, and again, I don't see any big changes yet for our spring. Again, just some little tweaks here and there. Obviously, girls soccer seating will be a part of that as well. You know, I think our board, with everything we've done this year, has really been kind of a back to normal approach. You know, no health departments, no governor's office, no pandemic. And so really it was kind of a back to basics. Which I think is really refreshing in a lot of cases. So our calendar's a little weird this year because Thanksgiving is as late as it can ever be. So the great thing is that fall practices started later than ever because it's tied to Thanksgiving. And I'm just hoping here that the run of good weather, we can maybe get 1 more month out of it, even though we'll be playing, you know, fall sports in volleyball and football as late in November as we ever have before. But heck, then again, we also played outdoor playoff games, Casey, in the month of January not so long ago. So
True too.
Our school people are pretty good at figuring out a way and getting the job done.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Mark Ewell, thanks so much for the time, and don't forget to catch the selection show at 4:30 p.m. Next Sunday on FanDuel Sports Detroit.
FDTV, FDTV.
FDTV, absolutely. All right. We'll talk to you soon, Mark.
Thanks, Casey.